It is the deadliest day since 1982 when about 800 people were killed in the Sabra and Shatila camps that were overrun in southern Lebanon. Uh, that has been marked quite rightly as one of the worst mass killings of the 20th century. Now we have more than 500 people killed in 24 hours, and we don't know how long this will go on for. Uh, Israel is not giving any indication as to when these operations will stop, when they'll declare victory over Hezbollah. So, yes, I think you can expect many thousands to be evacuating in Lebanon. And I think you can expect many, many more deaths, not just of Hezbollah fighters, but of civilians.
How significant is this latest escalation, given Israel is already fighting a war on another front in Gaza? What is Israel's end goal, do you think?
Well, I think if you talk about the Israeli leadership, especially Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, they will say, of course, their objective is to degrade Hezbollah, to reduce Hezbollah's capability to fire rockets across, the Israeli border. But I think a more important consideration for Netanyahu is to distract or take people's attention away from Gaza. Remember, critics inside Israel are now calling Netanyahu's forever war in Gaza. They're saying it doesn't have an apparent end. They are saying that the goals of getting the hostages back do not seem to be achieved. We saw hundreds of thousands of Israelis take to the streets on recent weekends saying, what are you going to do about it? What Netanyahu and, let us say, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant have done is take our attention to another front, to Lebanon, and to create what could be an open-ended war there, where people aren't pressing the hostages or Gaza necessarily as the priority to be considered.
Do you think it's likely we'll see a lot more fighting on the ground in Lebanon? Militarily, how do the two sides compare?
Well, I think, first of all, no, I don't think we're talking about an Israeli ground invasion into Lebanon. I say that for two reasons. I say that because historically Israel has run into trouble, including in 1982, in the 90s, in 2006, when it tried to carry out ground operations. It's much different from just bombing, bombing, bombing. And secondly, because the Americans have signaled they don't want it. The Americans, of course, who provide the essential military aid for Israel, have said, oh, we want a diplomatic off ramp and no ground operations. But they have not objected to the aerial operations. How the two sides compare, look, Israel has far more firepower than Hezbollah when it comes to an air war. Hezbollah really doesn't have an answer to the bombing. Uh, People may talk about Iran intervening on Hezbollah's behalf, but I don't see that happening.
And as you mentioned, there are concerns of those in Israel who are still pushing for their government to bring the hostages home from Gaza. Do you think their campaign will be stepped up even more following this latest escalation and also the focus being turned away from Gaza?
I think the campaigns will continue. And indeed, if you follow the Israeli press, you'll see that the stories are side by side. It's not that the hostages have disappeared from consideration. But what Netanyahu effectively has done is said, oh, you really want to challenge me? You want to replace me at a time when we're now fighting Hezbollah as well as Hamas? Do you really want to take that risk? And I think I don't want to diminish the importance of those protests, but I think Netanyahu has gotten himself a perverse type of breathing space by opening up the second front.
Well, it has taken the focus off Gaza, but bring us up to date on what is happening in the Gaza at the moment. How frequent are strikes there now? They continue, don't they?
Well, the strikes continue on a daily basis. So yesterday, for example, you had a couple of dozen of civilians who were killed. We're now at close to 41,500 people killed since October 7th there. The talk of a ceasefire, it was always remote. We could get a ceasefire, but now even the Americans are saying that doesn't look likely. So whereas a few weeks ago, we could have said, is there a way out? We're now talking about apparently ongoing operations in two theaters with no way out of either in the near future.
And do you think the hopes of reaching that deal seem even more out of reach, given what's going on in Lebanon at the moment?
Look, I'm going to say something I said probably going back more than 11 months near the start of this, when Hamas and then Israel started the cycle of violence. We will not get a ceasefire until Benjamin Netanyahu is out of power in Israel, and until Hamas has been sharply limited in its power in Gaza, and indeed until Hezbollah is curbed in Lebanon, there'll be no ceasefire.
Just lastly, Scott, if you could bring us up to date on some latest reports we're getting out of Lebanon, that warnings of a leaflet drop, but unconfirmed reports so far.
So this has come from Hezbollah's media office, which is telling people in southern Lebanon that leaflets are being dropped by the Israelis with a barcode on it. And they're telling people if you scan that barcode, you effectively let the Israelis into your phone. You let them into your device. That's all the information we have at this point, but this is linked to last week's attacks. Remember, the Israelis were able to penetrate pagers. They were able to put in doctored walkie-talkies. In other words, Hezbollah is fearful that the Israelis have got complete penetration of where they are, what their meetings are taking place, and the ability to even strike them with rigged devices.
Scott, as always, really interesting to talk. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.